The God of Wine with David Matheson. You're listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the angels and demons, the monsters of the serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. So, this is an interesting one for us. We don't normally do this, but we're recording this show way in advance of when it's going to be published. For multiple reasons. One reason is that I actually set this interview up with David Matheson, who is our guest today, a long time ago for me, right? I don't do this normally, but Matheson, when we were finishing up the Scablands tour, I was like, hey, man, we need to get you back on the show. You know, it's been a while or whatever. And he was like, yeah, just, give me 2 weeks notice or something. I was like, 2 weeks? Are you, I mean, like, come on. But anyway, I was trying to work out, like, what are all the shows going to be before, like, leading up to us going on all these trips. And I was like, oh, yeah, Matheson wants a long time notice. So I contacted him like a month ago and was like, hey, you wanted some kind of notice. So here we go. Let's set up a show. And then I set it up for Wednesday, today, basically, of this week. And then, of course, like it does with our podcast, lots of things changed. Stuff got moved around. Mm-hmm. And I completely forgot, which is the other thing that happens with planning things long-term out in advance.
Sol and I have been going out because of the Perseus meteor shower. Mm-hmm. We've been taking my truck, driving out into the middle of the driveway, which is in the middle of a big field on top of the hill. And I've got some moving blankets laid in the back of the truck, and we lay in the back of the truck, and I got the big laser that History Shift sent us. Yeah. Sent you one. And there, straight above our heads, is Hercules.
Yeah.
Right?
Ophiuchus, Hercules, Scorpio.
His head is just like right there, and then there's the corona.
Yep.
And so, Sol is really into the Legend of Zelda.
Yeah.
Right? He's into Link. He's into the hero story, right? Fight the bad guys, like do all this stuff. And so I do this terrible job of like, okay, here's Hercules, and he's trying to get this golden crown, dude. It's magical. And I start telling Sol these stories that are somewhat linked to the stuff that I've learned from Dave and in his various interviews and slideshows and stuff we've been involved with him. And, it turns into this epic battle, right?
Yeah.
Hercules has to get the golden crown. He has to, and the golden crown was stolen by the great bear.
Yeah.
And I'm just making all this stuff up
right.
and using it to show him, like, here's the great bear. And then he has to get in the river and go down, and he has to fight the scorpion at the base of the Dark Tower. Yeah. And he has to go into the Dark Tower. The Dark Tower is Ophiuchus. So he has to go into the catacombs and find Ariadne or whatever and fight the bull. And all, it's just like, I'm trying to make this like this hero story. And I don't know the myths that well. And so in the process, I ended up buying, we had done this multiple nights, and I'm like, you know what? I need to get the book.
Yeah.
The H.A. Ray book.
Yeah.
The Stars, A New Way to See Them. And so I bought that, and it just came in the mail. And when it came in, I took a picture of it and I sent it to Dave.
Yeah.
This was yesterday.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
And I'm thinking, I want to ask him to do a show with us on Monday.
Yeah.
And so I text Russ, and I'm like, hey, I want to get Dave on. He's like, oh, yeah, so we're booked for a show tomorrow.
Yeah. I was like, thank God, because we had just finished 211, the listener communications episode. And then the next day, Kyle's like, so what's next week's show? Should I get Matheson on? And I'm like, whoa. When is Matheson coming on? Because he's already booked. And then I went back through the text message. I'm like, holy crap, that's tomorrow.
It's perfect.
So I told Kyle, I'm like, yeah, actually, he's coming on tomorrow.
So thanks to the Perseus meteor shower.
Yeah.
We did not screw up our schedule with David Matheson.
Good grief. I need to do this better. If I make a...
And I don't think we told him that story either.
No, he didn't. If I make plans that far in advance, I'm going to have to make sure I put like multiple alarms in my calendar. Like,
that's another hard
alert
thing
me
to
a week
remember.
out and alert me 2 days out. And like, damn, almost completely.
You need to make an alert to remind yourself to build alerts.
Yeah,
for that
exactly.
stuff. So yeah,
So the other reason we decided to do it this week instead of postponing it till next week is that next week is actually probably we're going to be harvesting, and so this is better for us because now the show's done. I can set it all up to publish. So you guys will be hearing this after it publishes, but I'm back in the week before. I'm going to be able to schedule it and just we'll be done. So
lots of synchronicities here.
Yeah.
So we are, I randomly contact Dave. And of course, their harvest season is totally different than ours. We're harvesting in August. I think they harvest in October, like he said.
Yeah.
Off air.
Yeah. And he saw our Instagram posts.
Yeah, that's what.
Because I've been taking pictures and posting some of the Instagram of the wine that we're fermenting right now in the winery, and he was like, wow, it's like that made an impression on him, and then he decided to do Dionysus, the god of wine.
Very cool. We tried to get him to come in and just like do the tangent cube thing where we just shoot the breeze and just go whatever direction. But he chose to do, I guess maybe my questions to him the day before got him thinking like, oh, I need to work on a subject.
What am I going to talk about?
And so then he built this slideshow until 2 a.m.
Yeah.
So,
and it was a good one. It was great.
Yeah, we're like that's cool, and I definitely want to get him on more to tell us stories of the myths because it's all good stuff.
Yeah. So since this is basically 2 days after we recorded the last show, we're not going to do space weather news or anything else. We're just going to go straight into the interview.
We're going to get behind on listener communications as well.
We're going to be behind again. Yeah. So, but I think let's just dive right into it. It was a great interview, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And remember, there is going to be video of this as well. So if you listen to it and you want to see all the visuals, just go check out the video on our YouTube channel. All right.
Thank you, History Shift.
Yeah.
And
snacks.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we are very happy to welcome back to the show David Matheson. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Kyle and Russ. Great to be back.
Heck yeah, thanks for joining us. And I don't remember it's been a long time since we had you on the show.
Yeah,
has been. I didn't look up. I didn't actually look it up, but
I can find out what episode.
I think it was maybe before 2020, which. I think 2020 was like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, it feels like it, right? But yeah, we did a lot of Zoom conferences for the events that we did the Contact at the Cabin or Contact at the Canyons event with you. Lots of Zoom meetings leading up to that, which were a lot of fun. And then, of course, the trip itself, which was awesome. And then we did the Scablands together as well. So we've done a lot of stuff together and actually got to hang out and drink wine and visit and enjoy the trips, but we just haven't done a show in a while. So it's really great to have you back on. Appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Episode 109.
109.
That's when he was on last, yeah. So this is 212.
What are you guys up to? 212?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's almost perfectly spaced.
It is. And yeah, lots of the van rides, we were shooting the breeze and going off on tangents all over the place, and it was just a great conversation. So we were like, yeah, we gotta we got to get back on the show. This is good stuff. So
it is the rolling tangent. Those were the rolling tangent cubes of science.
That's right.
They all have their own secret names.
Yes.
Each band. But yeah, we had a great time. I mean, we must have covered the whole state of Washington 7 times.
Yeah.
Rolling around, rolling back and forth through the Luss. That was just a fantastic trip. The Scablands with Randall and Brad and you guys and Darren, and then obviously Brandon Powell in the Zion and Bryce Canyons trip. You know, I don't know which one I loved more. They were just so fantastic. They were just so full. You know, you look at the pictures from those trips and you're like, it's mind blowing.
Yeah, it is.
The scenery that we were in and just like the glow on everybody's faces.
Yeah.
Right.
It was just great.
They each had their own sort of vibe, but they were both great and also different.
For sure.
Yeah, I can't wait to do the next Canyons trip too. That's it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I know there's another Scablands coming up. I'm not able to make to that one.
We're going to.
Who's going to hold the map?
Yeah, I know. David Mappison.
You will have to have a cardboard, like cardboard cutout. Like right now, the map is a cardboard laminated cutout. You just have to get a whole thing, like the light beer from, in the liquor store holding the map.
Yeah, we need one of those pictures of you holding it, and we can take it to the print shop and just get them to just don't put the map in there. We'll make that a stand.
You can switch maps, yeah. No, those were just fantastic trips, and for those who are listening, you probably know all about them, but they were delayed. Both of them were delayed for 2020, right?
Yeah,
and then
that's right.
They finally happened in April and May of this year, and it was just fantastic. And you guys are like the linchpin that's a common denominator in all of them. And so is the Grimerica team.
Yep.
This time it was, Darren holding down the fort, but in the future, we know that we will finally get Graham down there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The Pagosa trip we went on, Graham was the one that was there holding down the fort, and Darren showed up way late.
Yeah.
And this one, it was reversed. Like Darren, and remember at the Scablands, Darren couldn't get there for the first couple of days. So
that's right. That's
And
right.
we've just been like the evil twin, like grabbing onto the heel of Grimerica as they're going on these tours.
That is mythological right there.
That's right.
It's celestial right there. But yeah, thanks for having me back on. And I really respect your podcast. I put out a little Instagram a minute ago saying, getting ready to go back on with the giants of podcasting, because we had a picture of us kind of looked like, it was like looking up.
I saw that.
The mountains. We looked like giants. But you guys really do. I always come on the show with trepidation for all the questions that you will ask that I will have no idea. So warning in advance, Snake Brothers have the deep questions, and there's no way I can answer them all. I don't pretend to be a guru who knows everything. I do know for a fact that the myths are connected to the stars. That much I am very confident in.
Yeah.
But I'm always excited to see the direction that things will go. You guys have such a great, sibling. Obviously, your family is a very awesome family there, and you guys have grown up with a curiosity about the whole world, and I think that's just so important. And I always say it at the end, but podcasts are so important, getting this information out to the world in a world where we know that the news is lying. I mean, the news is lying, and the stuff that we see on there. So podcasting is just so important. The job that you guys are doing. Congratulations on cranking out 200 episodes and plus episodes. And, I'm just always excited to see where everybody's personality brings a different angle of experiences and interests. So your interests and questions as we go into whatever we decide to talk about will be different than anybody else's. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. Thank you. So we did talk about subjects previous to the show. So I know you have some stuff prepared. So which direction are we going to go here?
I've got some stuff on the god of wine and
Excellent.
connections to the stars and esoteric. And I didn't
Yes.
even realize until after we picked that topic how heavy into the harvest season and the stomping of the grapes that you guys apparently are. But just to stick with the topic of those trips, thank you for the fantastic wine that you guys.
Oh yeah,
you guys showed up with cases of this very high quality wine, and I'm sitting here in wine country in California, San Luis Obispo County, which has over 300 wineries, vineyards growing as in all directions, just beautiful hills and vineyards, and so we have quality wineries to go around and taste that and drink wine. And I'm not a cultured palate by any means, but I can tell when I like something. And you guys brought some fantastic wine that we.
All right,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm glad that you guys are in the midst of this harvest. So I picked. Why don't we talk about Dionysus, the god of wine? And it is a subject that, as I got into it, I mean, I've written about it. Some of the material is written about in this. This is a book from 2016, Star Myths Volume 2, exploring the connections of the Greek myths to the stars. It's like 500-something pages, and
wow, look at
Dionysus
that
is in there. But it is a deep, deep subject. Dionysus is a profound, profound figure. So there's way more than we can ever possibly cover. But I did put together a little bit of Dionysus for you. But first, maybe you should tell us where are we in the harvest? What's going on with the grapes?
Well, we are. So the harvest season, we're in the harvest season. A lot of wineries, a lot of vineyards around us have already harvested a whole lot of their stuff. We have a slightly colder site, so we still got a lot of fruit hanging. But we have harvested a little bit. We've some small blocks that we had, and that wine it's in the winery bubbling away right now. It's and actually almost done with primary fermentation, which is turning the sugars into alcohol. There's a secondary fermentation, which is much more subtle and slower, and not something that's easy to observe. And that's where it's fermenting. A bacteria is turning the malic acid into lactic acid. So we won't know about that situation probably for another a week or so. We'll have to do some tests, but yeah, it's going really good. The wine smells really good. It's starting to cool down. So it's been going for what? How long has it been going?
Since Thursday? Is that when we?
Last Thursday?
Yeah.
Yeah. So almost, so 5 days, which is pretty typical.
And we have a CO2 ppm meter in the winery, which helps us kind of gauge in a way. I mean, it's not, incredibly accurate, but it lets you know, because like this, the default outdoor air parts per million for CO2 is between 380 and 400, and this meter is real sensitive. If you breathe on it, if you exhale CO2, it'll jump way up, and then it goes back down. It works
Taking
by
an average. Yeah,
it works by averaging out it's all the numbers it gets. But in the winery, we turn it on, and when primary fermentation is going, that number starts to climb. It gets up into the many thousands. When it's really going, it goes above 10,000 ppm, which makes it hard to breathe in the winery.
Wow.
There's so much CO2 in there that you get out of breath. It's like being at high altitude. You get out of breath real fast. So we're in there trying to punch the wine down, and we're doing it physically, and you start going, and the more you're punching the wine down, the more the CO2 is outgassing from the stuff.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a interesting process. So, but today we were doing it. I turned it on, and it was showing about 36 to 3,700 ppm, and then we start punching down, and it climbs above 4,000. It gets to about 4,200 or so. So now we know that the fermentation process is beginning to slow down, beginning to finish up.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, it's an ancient trade. It's an ancient practice that you guys are following. I don't have anything on the god of CO2 ppm today, next time, but
Randall
really cool.
said it's the first step in alchemy, right?
Well, that's
winemaking.
Winemaking is
a good one.
You're taking something like this sugary sweet grape juice, and you're turning it by like some mystical process that's very difficult to observe without modern scientific equipment. You don't you can't really, I mean, you can do taste tests and you can listen to it and you can watch it, but understanding what's happening is very difficult without modern, tools. And so
Lots
it
of
must
chemistry.
it must have seemed like magic, because it's just like, what's happening? Why does this process begin? And suddenly, instead of being sweet, now it's got spirits in it, right? It's got the alcohol. So
I just want to visualize, like, what's it sitting in right now? Is it? It's in a deep cave underground, right?
Yes.
Vats, or what's it in?
You walk down these roughly cut steps in the solid stone, and there's dripping water around you a little bit. And you get down in there, and there's torch lights, and it's in this gigantic oak container. No, it's sitting. It's sitting in a barn in a plastic tub.
All right. But what about the secondary fermentation? Does that happen in an oak cask or
Yes.
not?
Yeah, we'll put it into an oak barrel and hope to get it through that process as quick as possible.
Yeah, before that, we press it off. Right?
Yeah, you got to put it through the press.
Yeah. Because right now, it still has all the grape skins and the seeds and everything in there. And that's part of what gives it the color and, more complex tannins and stuff like that. But once the primary is done, we press all those skins off, and then you end up with just the juice and fine particulates that end up becoming lees, the stuff that they slowly settle to the bottom of the barrel. And then you rack it off, which basically means you siphon off the top to pull the wine down off the top so that you leave those lees in the bottom of the barrel. Then you wash the barrel out and you put the wine back in, or you switch containers, and you keep doing that to clarify it, because we don't filter. So that's a good way. That's an old school way of filtering, is just you rack it, and then you let it sit, and those particulates slowly drift to the bottom of the barrel, and then you rack it off again,
Yeah, well, I think it's actually, I could sit here and take over your podcast asking you guys questions. I'll be the host, and you guys about
Matheson of the Serpent podcast.
Yeah, like leaving it on, I've heard that, like, leaving it on, you want to leave it on as long as you want on the vine, as long as you can. At least around here, they tend to leave it on so it gets more sugars or something.
Yes,
but they want to get it out before it rains.
Yes.
So here in California, it doesn't rain in the summer like it does there in Texas. So we don't see rain like from April to November. But if there's if a rainstorm blows in October, everyone goes out and gets all their grapes in. And they're like, oh, forecast is for rain. We got to pull it out. But, but I think it's important to actually talk about it a little bit before we jump into the subject of the God of Wine, because we will see a wine press, and we will, it is a mystical process, and it has a mystical effect on us, right? When we're drinking, and it changes our state of consciousness. So it's pretty awesome that you guys are involved in this ancient, trade that is mentioned in the Odyssey. When Odysseus goes up to the Cyclops, he brings him some wine as a gift. And it turns out the Cyclops is not a good host. He eats his guests.
Yeah.
But Odysseus is glad to have brought that wine because it figures prominently in the escape. So before we jump into Dionysus, probably everybody knows, but I will just say, briefly as an overview, my research involves exploring the evidence that's really abundant, super abundant evidence that all the world's myths are based on this system of celestial metaphor. That means the Greek myths, that means and what does that mean based on it means that the figures in the myths, including the god Dionysus, including the characters in the stories in the Bible, including the stories of ancient Egypt or the Norse myths, all the way around the world, the Americas, the Maya, Popol Vuh stories are also based on this same system. Africa, Australia, the ancient India, all the stories in the Sanskrit epics are based on those figures, the different characters like Moses or Zeus can be shown to be reflecting the stars, based specifically on the stars and the heavenly cycles. They're using this language, this code, to convey powerful truths through these myths that are based on the stars. And it's like a giant esoteric language or code, and it all means something. So that's my argument. The evidence is just overwhelming that that's what's going on. And so I thought, let's explore that just with the figure of Dionysus if you want to. And we can tie it into, you'll see parallels to biblical stories, but I believe that the Bible is using this really very same system. And that's, to your show's core exploration and examination, that's a mystery. How is around the world all the myths using a common system? That is not what we're taught in the universities. And if I walked up to most university professors, they would say, well, that's, that can't be, or you're going to need some extraordinary proof to overcome the conventional paradigm is that there was no connection.
That's right.
There's clearly a connection.
Yeah, pyramids were just the easiest structures to build, right?
and they just use the same ratios around the world.
Yeah,
they tie into processional numbers like 108 and 432.
Yeah,
and, anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all true.
I forgot about that bell.
The modern academia, what we call the standard model of these stories, is still very isolationist. Right? The isolation model is that, all these cultures developed isolated from each other geographically by oceans, by time, and there's no connection. And so anybody who's doing comparative mythology and looking to see connections, especially when you're talking about connections across the Atlantic or across the Pacific, they just roll their eye. They're isolationists. There is no connection. The idea of diffusionism, that something like a common system of stories based on celestial, imagery, like you're talking about, is diffused throughout all these cultures and across time, is just something that the standard model in modern academia does not accept. So
yeah, they're dogmatically isolationist.
That's right. Absolutely.
Strictly, very severe isolationists. And there are some, not to get too off into the weeds, we can, dive into some cool pictures and discussions of wine in a minute, but there are some people who might, within the conventional paradigm, see this evidence and say, okay, well, let's find maybe a psychological explanation for it. People around the world can all see the stars, of course, but the connections are so, in some cases, obscure and so specific and so repetitive around the world in places that should have absolutely no connection to one another, that unless you posit something like a collective unconscious, which then that goes against dogmatic materialism. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Brains can't talk to one another from 5 feet away, let alone across the oceans.
Yeah.
And I don't deny that some of that may also be going on. But I think the most, when you say diffusionism, it conjures up ideas of ancient Egyptians and sailing ships going around.
Yeah, you're right.
But anti-isolationism, non-isolationism, it could be that there was a predecessor culture, which is what I think is probably the most likely explanation.
Yeah, that's
that
how I mean it.
They all have remnants of, not that they necessarily, I'm just clarifying, I'm not saying that you were arguing that, I'm just saying, the Maya were not the same time frame, at least when the Popol Vuh was written down, was not the same time frame as the ancient Egyptians, and yet they're based on the same pattern.
Yeah.
Or the Norse, the Norse from 1000 AD, very different textual time that those were written down. Of course, they were written down in Iceland after the Norse myths had mostly been eradicated by the literalist Christianity, but that's much later than 3000 BC of ancient Egypt, and the pyramid texts.
Right. So that makes the connections even more interesting, right? Doesn't it? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think they're all remembering something extremely ancient, because it's already fully developed in the Gilgamesh texts, which are extremely ancient, in the pyramid texts, which are extremely ancient, in the Vedas of ancient India, which are extremely ancient, in ancient China, in the most ancient places we know, the system's already fully developed of using the stars and the heavenly cycles in a way that connects to the divine realm and the stories of the divine. And actually, your whole podcast name, The Brothers of the Serpent, the isolationists are denying that some serpent deity went around, or some educating deity, some people pronounce it deity. I always grew up saying deity when I was playing Dungeons and Dragons as a kid. Deity.
I knew you were a D&D guy.
Oh, I was like in the first wave of it. I was like, when the kids were in, what's that, Stranger Things? Like the age they were, that's the age I was.
Okay, right.
The age they're depicting, that's when I was 10 or 12. The civilizing deity that goes around the world.
Right.
Well, what does that mean? Well, the connection is divine. There's a divine connection between, we're all, not necessarily that it was people going around the world. Somehow we're all connected in this,
it's like the
mystical way.
The serpent being a symbol of knowledge, and the character being sort of this personification of the knowledge, making it to all of these disparate communities and teaching them.
Yeah.
Right. That character.
Absolutely.
Could just be the knowledge.
Out, the characters that do that, the characters that are said to have done that, Hamlet's Mill actually spends a lot of time talking about kind of civilizing figures. They talk about Saturn as being one. They talk about Osiris as being one. They say Osiris has a straight beard to indicate that he's the only god who came down and lived among people, and he's the dying god. Well, it turns out that Dionysus, who the ancients even connected with Osiris, and he's also a dying god, and he's a god of wine. Dying and resurrecting gods are connected to wine. You might think of one from some biblical scriptures. That Dionysus also is said to have gone around to all these different places in the world. He spent some time in India. He spent some time in Thrace. He spent some time in Libya. He spent some time in, places of Africa. Libya is obviously in Africa. He was a god who went around the world, a civilizing figure, teaching them how to make wine.
Yeah.
In fact, when he went to Syria, the king of Syria, whose name was Damascus,
all right,
the king of Syria, opposed wine. And so Dionysus flayed him alive.
Whoa, dude.
Man, that's
celestial.
Serious.
That's celestial. So Damascus, the king, was flayed alive, and that's celestial. You can see there's a constellation that's right next to a giant square that was flayed alive. I can show it if we want to go down.
Maybe he thought he was a serpent as well, and he was just like, "You get rid of that skin."
Yeah, shed that skin, buddy. Let me show you this wine.
It's all about the serpents with you, isn't it? So anyway, I'm stoked to talk about this subject. I think it's a perfect one for two gentlemen who've just been making wine all day and all week.
That's Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah, I'm already very intrigued.
Yes.
Ready to show some slides? You want to?
Yeah, and sure. So while you're pulling it up, I'll remind people that we are recording video on this. So if you want to see what Dave is showing, you can watch this video on our YouTube channel, or if Dave sends me some of the slides, I can also post them in the show notes. I'm not sure. Yeah.
And so you can check the show notes to see if that actually happened.
Right. Yeah. It may or may not happen, but it'll definitely be in the YouTube video.
Yeah. They're massive, and they have some animation in them. So
okay.
But Dave is pretty good at describing what we're looking at.
Yeah. So just Dave, keep in mind we do have an audio audience, so we gotta describe what we're seeing here.
Okay. Well, great. Well, hopefully everyone's seeing just a black screen of void.
And some Chrome notifications.
Yeah, we see Chrome.
Get rid of those.
I can't see my mouse. Hold on. Let me find those things. Pesky. All right.
There we go. Clean that desktop up, Dave. What is that?
I know. Everyone's they're gonna be looking at all my backgrounds.
Yeah, people are gonna be isolating your icons and blowing them up into the chats and making memes.
In Telegram. All right. So today I thought we would talk about Dionysus, and this is a phrase from one of the hymns to Dionysus in the Orphic Hymns. He is given all these different names and different attributes. And at one point, one of the Orphic hymns, these are ancient hymns to many different gods and goddesses. So you can invoke the gods, you can call them, you can sing to them and praise them with these Orphic hymns. And there's several that are to Dionysus, or at least two main ones. And one of them calls him the mighty and many-shaped God. He takes many forms, just as wine takes many forms, as you were just describing kind of the basics to us. But he's a profound God. He takes many forms. Our interaction with wine and spirits take many forms. You can have a happy buzz. You can have all kinds of different rage and anger, and it gets into the subject of addiction and trauma, which I also discuss. And I am convinced that the myths have to do with healing trauma and recovery of self. And some people may say, well, where did that tangent come in? Maybe we'll get a way to weave it all in. But I am convinced that the myths are about finding our own self from whom we become disconnected. And so these myths about gods or goddesses going down to the underworld or being torn into pieces, as Osiris is, as Dionysus is actually describing truths about our condition right now, even in this modern age, even here in August of 2021, that we have many parts to who we are, many shapes to who we are. We have multiple personality, not disorder. That's actually, everybody has multiple personalities, according to some cutting edge psychologists that I've recently found, and really am convinced that their work resonates with what the myths are talking about. Dr. Richard Schwartz, for instance, who talks about internal family systems therapy as a way of understanding what's going on. And Dr. Gabor Mate, who talks about trauma and addiction and addictive behavior as being evidence of disconnection from the self. So we ourselves are cut up like the god or the goddess that goes down to the underworld. Many goddesses too, like Persephone.
Like we're like the pieces of those characters.
Exactly.
Like we have this phrase we call Osiris slivers.
Osiris slivers, yeah.
Oh, nice. Well,
So
you
it's
have
like
them. You've got Kyle slivers and Russ slivers.
The idea that the spiritual entity that is part of each person is like a piece. The myth is talking about like you're saying, the true self, but it's broken, fragmented into pieces.
Yeah.
So it's
Yes. Yes.
A lot
And
of
it's a
interesting
god.
connections if you look at things in that way.
Absolutely. No, I believe that this paradigm that the myths are offering, I was talking about this even in that 2016 book that I held up, Connection with the Divine Self, the Higher Self, long before I discovered that there are some cutting edge psychologists who have been talking about this for decades based on their interaction with people, other men and women. They've discovered this.
Yeah.
I'm convinced it's in the myths. In fact, there's no doubt that it's in the myths. The myths have these dying God figures, but they're indestructible. And Dr. Richard Schwartz talks about your self, your core self, your true self, your deeper self is indestructible that way. He has dealt with people who have had tremendous trauma, and yet they still, no matter what, it's not like you have to have a perfect childhood in order to develop this higher self. It's indestructible. And that's why I believe the myths, one reason why the myths show it as a god. The god is indestructible. No matter how many times, Dionysus is killed, he comes back. Or Persephone goes down to the underworld. Or Inanna goes down to the underworld in the myths of ancient Sumer and is hung up on a hook for 3 days, which is very similar to Christ being hung up on a cross.
Yeah.
And then going to the underworld for 3 days. So anyway, let's get into Dionysus, because he's connected. These connections are around the world. Here's a picture from an ancient Greek vase of Dionysus. I really like this one because it's got some amazing colors on this vase.
Yeah.
It's got some wine colors. He's associated with ivy. You can see around his head, he's got a crown of ivy.
Yep.
He's waving these gigantic like reeds or vines around him.
Yeah. Those are vines.
Yeah. But his vines actually have the special like pine cone shape. These are special vines that are associated with him. We'll talk about that a little bit. But in one hand, he's got a vine in this picture. In one hand, he's got a drinking cup or a pouring cup or a mixing vessel there.
And is he wearing like a lion skin?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is like a leopard skin.
It's a leopard skin. Okay. Yeah.
He's actually associated with a leopard skin. So good eye. So unlike Hercules or Heracles, who wears a
lion
lion skin,
Okay.
he wears a leopard skin. And that's a very common attribute of the god Dionysus, and you can see it there.
He's got very snaky locks.
I was going to say, his hair is pretty snaky.
Yes, he does. He's also, we'll see some of his epithets, some of his descriptive phrases, and one of them is the god of unshorn locks. So he never cuts his hair.
And those white outlines are grapes.
Samson.
Those look like grape clusters to me, the little white outlines that are there on the vines. Yeah. So I don't know. There's white outlines that kind of look like grape clusters hanging around the leaves that are purple. Interesting. I don't know what those big pine cone things are, though. That is.
Well, they often...
So they're actually pine cones.
In ancient times, they would grow... They wouldn't do a vineyard like we do today, where we destroy every other type of plant, and we just have the vines.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't have the technology to maintain that sort of... system and
monoculture.
Monoculture, which can get very sick or be susceptible to pests and stuff. So they would often intersperse the plants with other plants that were good at fighting off some of the pests.
Right. So. Well, I'm going to talk about it later, but since we're on it right now, I'll just say that there's a special name for this type of a staff that's specifically associated with Dionysus and his followers, and it's called a thyrsus. Thyrsus, kind of like I'm thirsty, but it's spelled THYRSUS. Thyrsus. And it's the stalk of a giant fennel. So it's not really a grapevine. Well, if you look it up in the dictionary, if you look it up online, you can look it up on Wikipedia. The thyrsus. I even have a dictionary around here that this is like the
you
one
have
that
a
was
dictionary
issued to me at West Point. Yeah. And it's got thyrsus, and it says, if I looked up thyrsus, it would say the stalk of a giant fennel with a pine cone on top, often adorned with ivy streamers and carried by Dionysus and his followers. So it's like a really specific thing.
Okay.
But we'll see some more of them. But you're right. It does. I mean, I see grapevines hanging from the, we've got some old vines around here that are, 100 years old, really thick branches and dangling big bunches of grapes. But I think this really is a pine cone, which of course brings in pineal gland and all those other subjects. So thyrsus. Were you looking up thyrsus?
I am. I'm looking at the staff with the pine cone on top right now. Yeah.
So is that person standing next to him holding on to the leopard tail of his...
Yeah, I think that's actually a serpent. So
he's got a snake.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
I think that is a snake. And so you can see the leopard. There's another leopard foot right kind of beneath the cup.
Yep.
But the artist didn't paint it with the distinctive leopard spots. Maybe that's the inner part of the leopard skin or something. But anyway, this is Dionysus. But he shows up in many different forms. Sometimes he has this beard. Sometimes he's very youthful looking and beardless. And sometimes he's much older. Bacchus figure. And Bacchus is the Roman name for Dionysus, but it's also a Greek name. So the Greeks did also refer to Dionysus sometimes by all these many different names.
Okay.
Dozens of names. And Bacchus means noisy, like reveling.
Yes, revelry.
Getting loud. Drinking up the wine and getting loud and partying. And he's surrounded by the figures who are often partying along with Dionysus are usually reveling quite sometimes violently. So we'll get into all that. But there's Dionysus. I like that picture. But I wanted to show you how you can invoke Dionysus. Well, you can pour some wine. I still got some water in my cup, so I'm not there.
I'll have to get some for the second segment.
Yeah, we're
third segment.
We're up on time here, so maybe we can.
Oh, okay.
Let's take a break and we can all get some wine.
Invoke Dionysus after? Yeah,
let's do that.
Okay. All right, we'll be right back, guys. This is great, Dave. Glad to have you back,
awesome.
Man. Snacks and wine. Back, ladies and gentlemen, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. We are joined by David Matheson, and we're talking about harvest and Dionysus and making wine and mystical spirits. So we're all invoking the god of wine here. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
There you go, Kyle.
What are we drinking?
This is the stuff we just bottled. This was a
oh yeah.
This is just a spare bottle, and it was like, we take the bottom of the barrel stuff home because it might have extra lees. It's stuff we didn't put labels on. So
yeah,
nice. Yeah, some of it came over when we clinked glasses there through the screen.
right.
So, tasty. Thank you. Yeah, we were just about I was going into the part of the presentation that has the invocation of Dionysus. If you want to jump back
absolutely.
in, or do we want to
jump right back in?
Yeah, let's
jump right back in. Let me share my screen again. Find where I was. And for those that are listening and driving an 18-wheeler or something and can't look at the YouTube, I will read it out.
Don't join us in the wine drinking.
Don't join in the wine drinking. That's right. Well, the podcast will either go down, down, down from here. All right, I'm going to share. So here's where we left off. I was explaining that there are these ancient hymns. There are many ancient hymns. There's Orphic hymns. There's some that are called the Homeric hymns. The Orphic hymns are just fantastic. They talk about invoking the different gods and goddesses. And this translation I really like, the one that I've put up on the screen. I think it came out in the mid-90s. So it's a pretty recent translation. But you can find, so for those listening at home, it's the Orphic hymns. The reason I'm not saying it is I don't want to mispronounce the name. Apostolos and Athanasakis.
Yeah, and he goes for it anyway. Good job.
Athanasakis, probably Athanasakis, and Benjamin Wolkow are the two translators from the 1990s. So it's a modern translation that I really like a lot. But you can find online older translations, including ones that go back to the 1800s and 1700s that are in the public domain. But these translations that I'll be using from the Athanasakis and Wolkow translation. This is number 30, which is called To Dionysus. So this is a hymn to Dionysus. And at the beginning of these hymns, almost all of them, or maybe all of them, say which incense to use. So it's not just, you're not just reading this, you're singing it, and this is the incense. In this case, it says, To Dionysus, incense, storax. And that's in the ancient text itself. And storax is from the resin of this sweet gum. It's called the Oriental sweet gum. This is a picture from Wikipedia of the Turkish sweet gum or Oriental sweet gum. And it makes the storax resin. And even today you can buy it. It's usually called styrax, Styrax, instead of, in this translation, it says Storax. Maybe that's the older way of spelling it. But you can find it. Here's a picture from Etsy. You can buy some black styrax or storax. You can buy it in all different colors, and you can burn it as incense. So before you sing this hymn, you can go get this dish of resin would cost $11 on Etsy, and then you can burn it smells like sandalwood, I guess is how it's described. I'm going to have to go check it out now that I put this all together last night when we were talking about what should we discuss, and I said, how about God of Wine?
Yeah.
So let's take a look at some of the characteristics and attributes of Dionysus. So it says, I call upon loud roaring, reveling Dionysus, loud roaring, reveling, primeval, two-natured, thrice-born, Bacchic Lord. So dual natures, born three times, savage, ineffable, secretive, two-horned, and two-shaped, ivy-covered, bull-faced, warlike, howling, pure. And it goes on. You take raw flesh in triennial feasts. Triennial means not annual,
Three
not
times a year?
biannual, 3 times a year.
All right.
And that's mentioned in these hymns a lot, and some of them were in the harvest season, as you can imagine. The biggest one is in the fall. Wrapped in foliage, decked with grape clusters, resourceful, Euboleus. So that's one of his names, resourceful Euboleus. Euboleus means good, boy, now I forgot what it means. Anyway, you can look it up, but that's the name.
We'll find out.
That's one of the names of Dionysus. Immortal god, sired by Zeus. He's the son of Zeus. Sired by Zeus when he mated with Persephone in unspeakable union. Hearken to my voice, O blessed one, you and your fair-girdled nurses. Fair-girdled means, they're wearing like belts around their waist and they're very attractive. The way their dresses look, they wear it well. Hearken to my voice. So this is a hymn. It's actually calling out to Dionysus, calling him, O blessed one, you listen to me. Listen to my voice, you and your fair-girdled nurses. So he was nursed by the nymphs on Mount Nisus. We'll talk about it in a little bit, some of his story, not all of it. There's so much to Dionysus. We would go for, I'd forgotten I wrote this, but back in 2016, I wrote, you could write a whole book of star myth exploration on Dionysus alone and still just be scratching the surface. So this isn't the end of the hymn. This is second to last. Yes?
I'm looking up Euboleus, and he's actually a god. He's a god known primarily from devotional inscriptions for mystery religions.
Yeah, the Orphic hymns are mystery hymns. So these are mystery hymns. Yes, and we'll get into that too.
Good counsel, or wise in counsel.
Good counsel.
There it is.
Yeah, I knew it was something good because of the preface you, but I forgot exactly what it was overnight. I knew it yesterday. But let me finish off the
Too much wine.
Exactly. Hearken to my voice, O blessed one, you and your fair-girdled nurses, the muses. So he's calling on Dionysus and the muses, or Dionysus, in this case, it's the nymphs, but Dionysus also is the leader of the muses in some cases, or he hangs around with the muses.
Okay.
But they're calling to him for help, or in this hymn, you're calling for his presence. And at the end, it says, breathe on me in a spirit of perfect kindness. So he's also associated with, the divine spirit. That is something that is across cultures that we see in other cultures as well, also in the Bible, of course. So this gives a little flavor of the Orphic hymns and some of those aspects. And we'll talk about his two births and his three births really, and his two natures in a moment. But I'll give a little bit of backstory. But let me just show a few more quotes, if you'll bear with me for just one more page. These aren't as extensive. There's another hymn called To the God of Triennial Feasts, 3 times a year. I call upon you, blessed, so he's called blessed, many-named, frenzied Bacchus. Many names, so he has many names, as we already saw. Bull-horned Nicean from the region of Nisus and Mount Nisus, and there's plenty of disagreement as where that is. I can show you where it is. It's in the heavens. But anyway, Lysios, Lenaios, conceived in fire, nourished in the thigh. These are all parts of his myths. And all those names, Lysios and Lenaios. Lenaios actually, I think one of them has to do with the wine press. Now I've overnight forgotten what all these different names mean, but you can look them up.
I'll look them up.
These are his different names. Lysios and Lenaios. One of them has to do with, I think, wine press. I think Lenaios might be a wine press. So you guys were just talking about the whole process and when it gets to the press. So nourished in the thigh, we'll get to that. Father and son of the gods, you take raw flesh, and sceptered you lead us. Sceptered, we talked about the thyrsus, we'll get more into that. So carrying a scepter of some sort, and his scepter is this vine type scepter, into the madness of revel and dance. O son of two mothers. So he's got two mothers. That's super important in myth, and it is found in myth around the world. So talking about connections, Osiris, there are some texts that talk about, Horus having Isis bore him, but Nephthys nursed him, or Jesus is always seen with two Marys. There are, I've written a whole blog post about the two mother pattern. There are two mothers in the judgment of Solomon, the mother of the live baby and the mother of the dead baby that Solomon is choosing between. This is a pattern that's found throughout myth. It's an esoteric, it is teaching us profound things about ourselves. Son of two mothers.
He's got two aspects or two personalities. He's born 3 times and he has 2 mothers. Wow. He's his own brother from another mother.
Yeah, he's a father and son of the gods. Well, let me explain the story. Yeah, he is. Good poetry. Kyle. All this invoking of the ancient poems is making, now we'll speak the rest of the podcast in verse.
Yeah, there we go.
Horned and clad in fawn skin, you roam the mountains. And apparently some of the nymphs and the maenads who follow him, the famous maenads we'll talk about, they wear like skirts of fawn skin. So he wears kind of effeminate clothing. He wears, and we'll talk about why in a minute, and you can see that in his long robes in that first picture that I put up. Exulting in ivy, followed by many maidens. So he's followed around by many maidens. And then a couple other final quotes to just close off the quote page. Ovid, who's an important poet, wrote the Metamorphoses, was born in 43 BC, calls him in somewhere in the Metamorphoses, he calls him the god whose locks are never shorn, never cut. And remember, in the Bible, we have Samson.
Yes, sir.
Takes the Nazarite vow. Actually, Nazarite vow involves not drinking any strong drink, right? Not touching any dead bodies, not drinking any strong drink, and not cutting your hair. But this is an attribute of Dionysus, that his locks are never cut. And also Seneca, a Roman poet and playwright, calls him thou Bacchus from Thyrsus bearing India. Thyrsus being that special rod. So he's associated with India of unshorn locks. And we'll get into that later too. So
there's a little bit of Gilgamesh in there, right? Like Gilgamesh, after he loses Enkidu, he wears, he slays all the lions. He's wearing the lion pelts all the time. And then I think doesn't he meet the lady at the gate is the goddess of wine?
She's the bartender of the gods, Siduri. Yes. At the so whether she feeds or offers beer or wine. So I actually discussed this I have a book in 2019 called The Ancient Worldwide System, where I really go into the Gilgamesh epic and its connection to other myths and also to the stars and this pattern. And the first thing that Enkidu eats when he gets civilized is either bread and wine or beer and wine. So different scholars
discuss
that. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
But yes, Siduri is the bartender at the end of the world. Like when you get to the very end of the world, I'm pretty sure it's Siduri, the bar. I'm just going off of memory right off the
bartender to the gods. Wow. Do not accept tabs. Don't. Trying to get those debts paid is going to get you killed.
So let me tell a few stories about the god of wine. Let me see.
Oh, please do.
Yeah.
Oh, I did put up a couple pictures of Thyrsus rod or Thyrsus.
Okay.
staff.
Oh yeah. So man, that one looks like it's bamboo.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a giant fennel. So this is not the greatest resolution. Sorry, I just copied it off of Theoi is a great website. This is off of Theoi, so I'll give them attribution. But look at those locks of hair.
Yeah.
Look at those dreads. And when I say dreads, I'm not making an inappropriate comment, because there is a connection all the way back to Dionysus, to dreadlocks. Because Dionysus went to India, the sadhus of India, or the sadhus, the ascetics of India who don't cut their hair, basically wear dreadlocks. In Jamaica, there were people brought over by the British, the British who went and colonized and enslaved and oppressed everybody, brought people over from Africa and from India, and they mingled in Jamaica, working in the hot Caribbean down there. And that sadhu tradition from India was transferred, and that's where Rastafari has a connection, which they acknowledge. They talk about the Nazarite vow and some of the reggae music you can hear talking about. So there's a connection. We'll maybe get a chance to explore that a little bit. But this Thyrsus rod it's a giant fennel, a stalk of giant fennel topped with a pine cone. And you can see on the far left, there's a kind of a face of a satyr coming in. He's often also accompanied by these kind of extremely sexually aggressive satyrs who are always running around trying to basically get drunk and have a party and have sex with various people that they're chasing
with
around.
all the nymphs that are following him around.
Basically, yeah. So that's one of the satyrs, it looks like. But this was a picture off of Theoi. What I was saying is Theoi is a great website, THEOI, for just searching and finding different sources about different gods and goddesses and heroes of ancient Greece. And this is a picture off of the Dionysus page. I just thought it was a nice illustration of a thyrsus rod. And here's a statue of Dionysus. This is not an ancient one, but there are ancient ones that have the same attributes, but most of them are missing the head or, parts.
Yeah, they're busted.
So
yeah.
You won't see the thyrsus as nicely. So I just chose a modern one from St. Petersburg. But it's quite good at showing some characteristics. The thyrsus rod, he's holding a pitcher in the other hand. You see it there. It's kind of head-on angled to you. But although he's very muscular, he's also very effeminate looking.
Yeah,
right?
I can see it.
And that is part of the story. So let me tell you a few parts of the myth that, and people can go read up on their own, like at Theoi or other places, books on mythology. But we heard in the hymn that Zeus, who's always going around and wanting to sleep with everybody, inappropriately, according his wife Hera is not happy about this. He sleeps with Persephone. There's many different versions of all these different Dionysus myths, but according to some versions, the first birth of Dionysus was from Persephone. And so as he's a baby and he's growing, just out of infancy, Hera, the wife of Zeus, who's not happy when she learns that there's been a child born by Zeus and Persephone, goes to the Titans and encourages them to kill the baby Dionysus. And so they get his attention by giving him either a golden apple or a golden ball to play with, and then they start to attack him. And there's a great battle, and some of the ancient myths talk about it, or ancient authors talk about it. He turns into a snake, and he turns into all these different forms to try and fight the Titans, but there's too many of them, and he's basically, just learned how to walk, although he's a god. And the Titans eventually tear him limb from limb, tear him apart, which is a pattern that we find around the world. Dionysus was anciently understood to be associated with Osiris, who was also tricked by his brother Set and cut up into 14 pieces later on. So this dismemberment of the god is a pattern that's an important pattern. Anyway, Zeus is not happy about this. So he takes the heart. They've scattered the pieces of Dionysus all over the place. Zeus takes the heart and pounds it up into a potion and gives it to a beautiful mortal woman that he's in love with. Her name is Semele, or Semele. I think it's pronounced Semele, Semele. And she drinks it and becomes pregnant with Dionysus again. So that's how he's almost like he's the son of Zeus, but he's almost like his own father, or it's a virgin birth, or it's a immaculate conception.
Yeah, so that's the two mothers right there, because he has.
Yeah, that's the second mother.
And one's mortal and one's divine. That's very.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very Jesus-like.
There's a lot of parallels. In fact, that first picture, that I put up in the kind of with the purple robes and the crown of ivy is very similar motifs and artistic conventions. So I
don't think I've ever seen a depiction of Jesus
Semele
doing a striptease like that, though.
No.
Yeah, it's really very definitely. So now
it's
Hera
suggestive.
Again,
it's well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't make it weird, Roscoe.
I'm just saying.
One comment too many. So Semele drinks the potion containing the heart, or in some cases, another god or goddess like Athena or Hermes usually finds the heart and brings it to Zeus, or sometimes Zeus finds it. But in either case, Semele conceives of, and she's carrying the child again, of Dionysus is going to be born a second time. And Hera finds out about the affair going on between Zeus Semele. So Hera disguises herself as an old woman in some versions of the story, or she goes up to Semele, not showing that she's the wife of Zeus, a goddess. And she says, is it really true that you and Zeus, the mighty god of heaven, are having an affair? And Semele says, oh, yes. He loves me. And Hera says, I don't believe he really loves you. You're a mortal woman. I mean, you are very beautiful, one of the most beautiful women in the world, for sure. But, oh, no, he loves me. In fact, he loves me so much he promised to give me whatever I want. He made a vow as the god Zeus that he would give me whatever I asked for. And Hera says, really? Oh. Well, I still find that hard to believe. But if it's really Zeus, you should ask him, when he comes to make love to you, has he ever come in all his glory as the mighty Zeus with his thunderbolt and, radiance of clouds and thunder? Well, no, he hasn't done that. Well, how do you know it's really Zeus? Well, I'm sure he's Zeus. Well, why don't you ask him to come to you as he comes to his goddess wife Hera when he's going to go into the bedroom with her in all his glory, with all his power? Why don't you do that? Somebody says, okay. Now she's got like the seeds of doubt planted in her mind by Hera. Well, I wonder if it really is Zeus. Maybe I'm being taken advantage of here. Anyway, Zeus, next time he comes to visit Semele, of course, says, how are you doing? My love, what's going on? And she says, oh, do you really love me? Yes, of course. You promised to do whatever I ask. Yes, I will. What do you want? Well, why don't you come to me the way you come to Hera in all your power and glory with the thunderbolts and everything? And Zeus says, that's a very bad idea. The reason I don't do that is you're a mortal woman. You would be burned to a crisp and die. That would be it. And don't ask for that. Ask for anything else. I'll give you anything.
Classic.
He starts off.
Anything except that.
Of course, she says, now she's really starting to doubt, like, oh boy, the seeds of doubt. Maybe I've been wrong all this time. No, that's what I want. And of course, the rest of the story. So he says, okay. And he tries to, the Dolaire's book of Greek myths. I don't have it. I might have it within arm's reach. But anyway, I grew up with the Dolaire's book of Greek myths. They say in that story, the way they tell it, they say, well, he tried to pick the smallest cloud and the littlest thunderbolt he could. But it doesn't matter. It was too much. And it's not funny. She was burned to a crisp. But it's a myth. So, but the baby, of course, is immortal. So Zeus, the baby hasn't come to its full term, but Zeus says, I'm not going to let this baby die, or I'm going to make sure this baby is born. Zeus sews the baby up in his own thigh and carries the baby to term. And so he's sired by Zeus. He's thrice-born. He's born 3 times, basically, 2 mothers. And then when the baby's finally born, Zeus is like, I got to hide this baby. So he hides the baby in his thigh until the baby's 9 months or 40 weeks. Then when the baby is born, baby god, Dionysus, finally, now he's got to hide him because he knows Hera will still have it out for him. So he takes him to the nymphs of Mount Nissos. And there is where the god, the Dios, the Zeus of Nissos is raised. So his name, Dionysus, means the Zeus or the god, the Dios. Dios, that's the word in Spanish for God.
God, yeah.
It's related to Zeus. I mean, it's linguistically the same as Zeus. Zeus, Dios. Dionysus means the Zeus of Mount Nissos, or the god of Mount Nissos. He was raised there, but he tells the nymphs, you got to keep him secret from Hera. In fact, it might be better if you have him dress as a girl for as long as possible. And so they dress him in saffron robes, which means flowing yellow, soft robes. And eventually that is not going to, eventually when he reaches, puberty and manhood, he will not be able to be concealed as a girl anymore. But even as a grown man, he still dresses, he likes those kinds of clothing according to the myth because of that. So also Achilles was dressed as a girl. This is, I argue that this is based on the stars as well. We can talk about why. But later when it's too late, he's too mature to be dressed as a girl. In some of the myths, they turn him either into a ram or into a goat for a while to hide him some more. Okay, too late to make him pass as a girl anymore, but we'll leave him as a ram or a goat until he's full grown. Then once he's a god, then he's safe. Once he's a full grown, powerful Dionysus. So that's some of the story behind these, flowing robes and why he never cuts his hair, or why he's got this kind of two natures. He's a border crossing God, and wine is a border crossing. It breaks down barriers, right? It breaks down cultural barriers. It breaks down social restrictions and things like that. He's a very complex figure, Dionysus. So there's some of his attributes. Probably enough for us to go to the stars and start looking at them. But maybe you guys want to comment, or are you just sitting there going, "What did I just hear?"
Sitting here.
I'm absorbing the stories. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I have read about Bacchus Dionysus before, but I didn't know all those little details. So that's fantastic. The thrice-born.
There's actually
in
even
the thigh.
There's more and more and more.
Yeah,
but,
it's really cool. I do remember the part about him being raised and concealed as a girl by the nymphs and naiads or whatever, but I didn't know that's why that he continued to dress that way. That's interesting.
Well, some of the ancient sources, and you can find, the reason I like Theoi so much is it quotes a lot of ancient, it'll kind of collect together, here's what Seneca said, and here's what Ovid said, and here's what some of the later mythologists in like the 3rd, 4th, or 5th centuries AD said. Well, here's some more ancient sources like, Homeric hymns or things like that. So I like that. You can find even more stories. Dionysus is a very, and then he travels to India. He travels to Libya. Some people say that Nisus is in Libya. Some people say that Nisus is in Thrace. He's associated with Thrace in Greece. He's associated with India, very strongly associated with India.
Does he have something to do with the hearth, or is that a different?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. Yeah, there's Hestia.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I don't know every single aspect of every single god or goddess.
All right, well, podcast over. Come back when you do.
Yeah, I know. Just delete that part out.
I'm trying to imagine what is the relevance of all of this details, like all of these details of his upbringing or his past, and how does this? I just don't understand. This. I find this is not unusual with the myths, but sometimes it's really clear that there are connections that make sense, but all these details. What is the point? Why is he connected with wine? What is that? Why does he become the god of wine? And how do these details of his past have anything to do with that?
Great.
Other than
questions.
that, you're changing something into something else. Like I get that generalization, but
so I believe that Dionysus is a higher self figure. That the part about the indestructibility, the trauma, the being separated from yourself, that the myths are talking about. It's not necessarily as clear. It's not as clear of an argument here, but the fact that the myths are talking about a higher self, one of the pieces of evidence that I go to the most is the prevalence of twins. Twins is different from having two mothers, although, but this kind of dual nature, two mothers also has to do with lower self and higher self sometimes, or as you pointed out, mortal and immortal. Well, twins are often mortal and immortal as well. Castor and Pollux. Gilgamesh is 2/3 divine. Enkidu is more mortal, and Enkidu goes down to the underworld in the Gilgamesh epic.
Yep.
And Castor and Pollux. Castor goes down into the underworld, and Pollux says to Zeus, his father, "Is there any way I can share some of my immortality with him?" And Zeus says, "Yes, but you'll have to share some of his mortality." Well, it's not two people. It's not talking about two people. There's not two twins. That's you. You have multiple aspects of who you are, and part of that is a divine higher self or an indestructible higher self. That's the myths are trying to point you towards that with stories. And so I believe that Dionysus, with his two mothers and with his two natures, has to do with our higher self. He's in his indestructible aspects, has to do with our higher self, and the connection with wine and spirits is like, it has to do with tapping into kind of what suppresses our higher self. Well, how do we get disconnected from our higher self? Well, it's through trauma. It's through And there's certainly already, as you can see, lots of trauma in the story. We've got
for sure.
We've got being torn to pieces, and the goddess Hera wants him dead, and his mother got burned to a crisp because of this doubt. And there's doubt. Doubt is in the story. Doubt is in the story a lot when it comes to being separated from your higher self. Doubting Thomas, I talk about this a lot, but also doubting Arjun in the battle of Kurukshetra in the Bhagavad Gita. Arjun is filled with doubt before the battle, and he says to Krishna, I don't think I can go on. I don't think I can fight this battle. I don't know what to do. And then Krishna gives him the Bhagavad Gita, the song of the Lord. Krishna is the higher self figure. And in fact, Krishna has a lot of characteristics that are similar to Dionysus. Krishna is actually an avatar of Vishnu.
Yeah.
And Vishnu, I show with a lot of evidence in the Ancient Worldwide System. That's a 2019 book that goes through a lot of ancient India, ancient Egypt. Vishnu is associated with the same constellation as Dionysus, as Krishna. Krishna, Dionysus, Jesus, the Buddha, Inanna, when she gets hung up on a hook in Sumer, are associated with the same constellation. I bet you can guess the constellation, but don't say it yet.
I don't want to guess because I'm afraid to be wrong.
Yeah.
But
I can see that.
It's a great question.
It's interesting too because the trauma in this case is, I mean, in the first birth, he's actually trying to fight. But in all of the trauma through the second part is like he's just a heart, and he's an unborn, or he's he.
Well, then his mom gets burned to a crisp.
His mother gets burned to a crisp while he's still in the womb. But this is like, in other words, the trauma is something like if that was something that happened to a human, they wouldn't necessarily remember. That would be really deep.
Yeah.
Deeply rooted.
It's trauma start like from the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's
something that you wouldn't have a memory of, but would be a part of your character forever.
Absolutely right. Deeply rooted, almost impossible to dig down to.
Yeah. That's a deep observation. I mean, it is a deep observation because when you listen to Dr. Gabor Mate and Dr. Richard Schwartz talk about trauma and what it means and the separation from the self, and it's because of a deep injury. And I'm not a psychologist, okay? Everybody listening should know that right off the bat. I am focused on the connection between the myths and the stars. That is my area of study and that I've been looking at for about a dozen years now. But what they talk about really resonates to me with what's going on in the myths. I'm convinced that there's a parallel. And they talk about how there's a term called attachment injury. When a child, that is as young as 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, they are dependent on their parent. They are programmed for survival to rely on their parent. And when that parent lets them down in a profound way, or betrays that trust, or wounds that child in a profound way, or hurts that child deliberately, or is just so, let's say that the father, I use this example a lot because it resonates. It comes from something that Dr. Schwartz, I think, said. If the father is very unpredictable, he's often loving, but sometimes, bad day at work or whatever, gets into a drunken anger, the child doesn't know what's going on, relies on that parent. Can't just say, you know what, guys, I'm hitting the road. This house is too crazy for me. I'm 2.5. I'm out of here. Can't do it. Cannot.
Yeah.
Must deal with the situation. And it is more threatening to the child to say, something is wrong with my father. He's got a wire crossed. I'm living in a very unpredictable world where the person that I rely on, who's fully grown and strong and brings home the food, or my mother is like this or whatever, the person I'm programmed to depend on is arbitrary and crazy and sometimes loving, and sometimes there must be something wrong with him or her. That is a very threatening, that means the world is out of control. So what the child does without even knowing it, I'm basically trying to paraphrase what I've heard many times from these different healers and read their books, these psychologists, modern cutting-edge psychologists like Dr. Gabor Mate, will say that what we will do is say, instead of coming to that conclusion, they'll say, there must be something wrong with me.
With me.
Because I can fix that. I better work on it.
Yeah.
Because if it's...
And you spend your life trying to fix an unfixable problem.
Yeah.
I can't fix that, and it's terribly dangerous. It's like the planet Jupiter is off track, and it could hit Earth at any time. I can't live with that fear because there's nothing I can do to stop the planet Jupiter.
Right.
But wait a minute. If I just recycle my bottles, maybe Jupiter will never hit me. Okay, I can control that. Okay, good. I'll work on that. It's like that kind of a mentality. So the child suppresses certain aspects or
of themselves
and doesn't even know that he's doing it. So your comment was so profound because you said it's almost like they're picturing trauma that you can do nothing about. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
And it's not his mom's fault. It's not even really Zeus's fault. I mean, you could say it's Zeus's fault. But anyway, what psychologists like Dr. Gabor Mate will stress is it's not the parents. The parents might be trying to do their best. Maybe they're traumatized. Maybe they're living in an economic situation that's horrible, whatever. They're trying to do their best for their child, but this trauma seeps in. And we don't even know that we separate from ourselves. And we develop all these doubts and we develop all these mechanisms that we carry with us for the rest of our life. And the myths are like a picture to show you, guess what? There is a higher self. You don't even know it. In fact, there's parts of you, like defense mechanisms, parts of your personality that will deny it out of a defense mechanism. Like, don't tell me I suppressed myself. Meanwhile, they're like stuffing the self down in the basement.
Yeah.
There's no self here.
Right.
Because it's threatening. Because they're trying to control the situation. And they're like, don't let that old trauma come back up. So the myths are showing us, A, that it exists and that it's related to trauma, and B, but actually self is immortal, like a god or a goddess that goes down into the underworld, but can come back and even can be torn to pieces and still reassemble. And you don't even know it. So we got to show it to you in some pictures to wake you up to the fact that you are disconnected from yourself. That's your number one thing that you're searching for. That's the number one problem in your life. And the myths are all about recovering that self, or at least that's one of the main things they're all about.
All right. Well, that's
very cool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We're up on another break here. Maybe when we come back, we can look at the connection with the stars. You can show us some.
Yep.
All right. And I just want to know, when he's finally born the third time, does he come out and he's like, it's time to party because I gotta. Come on.
That's in the myths.
All right,
that's
good.
in there.
It's in there? Good. All right, we'll be right back.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment here with Dave Matheson going over the Dionysus mythology, god of wine. So now we're going to get to looking at the stars and the connections to the stars with all these aspects, right?
Yeah, no.
Is that right, Dave?
I'm going to share my screen again here, and I'll start back on the slide where we were. Here's where we were. So yeah, the two natures or the multiple sides, I think there's another lesson in there, just before we leave these pictures, you were saying, oh, really seductive pose or whatever, but we have these multiple sides, but the world doesn't want you to have multiple sides. That's something that Dr. Schwartz talks about in internal family systems. Like if you say you've got multiple personalities, that's like there's something wrong with you. That's been stigmatized. And the fact is we do have multiple natures. This is illustrating truths about who we are and the different, there's I remember in high school learning about, well, there's Dionysian and there's Apollonian. There's Apollo is reason and measure, and Dionysus is nature and chaos and wildness. And it's like, well, which one do you want to be? Well, you want to be Apollo? You want to be more of a follower of Apollo or more of a follower of Dionysus? And the point is, we all have all those aspects and attributes and sides to who we are and parts of who we are. We have characteristics that are more like Apollo or more like Artemis or more like Ares sometimes maybe, or more like Dionysus sometimes. But the higher self, I would argue that Dionysus actually is picturing for us higher self, just as those other figures that I mentioned, like Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, is picturing higher self, and the Buddha is a picture of the characteristics of higher self. So let's take a look at what constellation could relate to all these features that we've talked about. So am I sharing? You guys are seeing the pictures of the Thyrsus? Yep. Got it. Good. Great. So let's go over to the stars. Here's a screenshot from Stellarium or Stellarium.
Oh, man.
Stellarium.org. And yes, you guys are already, we've been on these trips that we talked about. Look at all those. Everything's just jumping right off the screen at you. There's the beautiful Milky Way right up the center of your screen. You can see the Milky Way, and the brightest part of the Milky Way, it's called the galactic center, is right there kind of in the lower part of your screen. I'm describing it for people who just have to listen, but I'm going to outline a few familiar constellations to the Snake Brothers, maybe not as familiar to everybody. These are the outlines of, Kyle.
Well, we've got Hercules, we've got Ophiuchus.
No, I meant the outlining system. Sorry.
This is H.A. Ray. H.A. Ray, yeah.
That's what I was fishing for. I didn't give you enough clues. No, my bad.
I was going to name every one.
Name all these constellations.
Yeah, you get an A+. But these are the outlining systems of H.A. Ray, the great children's author who, along with his wife Margaret, created the Curious George stories. Also wrote a book called The Stars, A New Way to See Them. These are the outlines that I'm showing here on Stellarium. You can set it up to where you see those outlines. And I'm going to start with the one you said first, which is Hercules, right up at the top. Powerful lunging figure. I did put that picture that you stuck up on our group chat thing with, later on in the slideshow of your video game. But look at the characteristics.
Yeah. Old statue
Hercules.
of Zeus. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I've got that slide later on. But first, let's introduce everyone to these characteristics. Really important characteristics of Hercules: square-shaped head, deep lunge posture. Everyone should be able to see this who is seeing the screen. Deep lunge posture with rear heel raised, front knee deeply bent, one arm brandishing a weapon overhead. Mighty weapon. Could be a club in some myths, could be a sword in other myths, could be all kinds of different weapons. A mace in some of the myths of ancient India. And then the other arm reaching forward, prominently reaching forward. The figure is called Hercules, but that doesn't mean that this is the only figure in myth, Hercules, that this constellation represents. The hero Hercules or Heracles is associated with this constellation and is almost always depicted in ancient myths in this posture, or ancient art in this posture, but so is the father of Hercules or Heracles, Zeus. This is a drawing based on a piece of ancient pottery. That's Zeus right there. In this case, the weapon is
the Vajra.
The Shamir.
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys.
And that's an open Vajra. Very dangerous.
It is.
Yeah.
Yep. This is the Thunderbolt Weapon, and what Russ and Kyle are referring to is this is the same depiction that you see in India. The weapon of Indra is usually who carries the thunderbolt. Also in the Maya, there are Maya codexes I could show. I'm not showing in this as a tangent, where the thunderbolt is very similar in shape to the same Vajra shape too. But look at what I'm trying to call attention to here is that deep lunge.
The posture, yes.
Yeah. Big, bend in the knee, heel raised, one arm brandishing weapon overhead, one arm reaching forward. And you can see that, just look down, look up, reaching forward, deep lunge, weapon overhead,
yep.
Square-shaped beard or full beard. Zeus usually has a full beard. This is not who Dionysus is associated with, not with Hercules. Dionysus is the son of Zeus. So figures who are the son of Zeus, or in the case of Athena, she springs out of do you guys know the story of Athena? She springs springs fully formed out of the head of Zeus.
The forehead of Zeus, yeah.
The head of Zeus, and she's the goddess of wisdom. Well, gods and goddesses who are the son or daughter of a figure will sometimes be right below them, as if descended from them. So who's right below Hercules, or what figure is right below Hercules?
Ophiuchus.
Yeah.
Ophiuchus.
And
this is the constellation Ophiuchus that I just outlined. Yeah.
Got his staff.
Yeah, he's not holding a snake. He's holding a cup and
the vine.
a pine cone thing.
Yeah.
So very good, pine cone. This is the constellation Ophiuchus. For those who are listening or those who aren't super familiar with it, it's got a central body that's almost like a tombstone shape, or a tall rectangle, like an oblong shape. Like, if you're driving right now, it's the shape of your gas pedal, not the brake pedal. Tall rectangle with a triangle on top, and that's the central body. And then 2 legs underneath. And then there's this serpent. The name Ophiuchus means serpent holder. In ancient Greece, that word means the holder or the bearer of a serpent. And you can see on the left side is the tail. As we face the screen, I've got the way it's oriented on the left, that's the tail of the serpent. On the right, that's the head of the serpent. But as you guys are already pointing out, it can take on many different forms in many different myths, including a pine cone, or even, this is a secret that I reveal, or an interpretation that I reveal in 2019 Ancient Worldwide System, a wine glass. You see how that can look like a wine glass?
Yeah.
You think, wait a minute, they didn't have wine glasses in ancient. Well, sure they did.
Yeah.
It might not have been made the same way or made out of glass. It might have been made out of all kinds of things. But figures associated with Ophiuchus are often associated with wine, bread and wine. There's a figure called Melchizedek in the Old Testament who was the first one to bring out bread and wine. And guess what? He's associated with Ophiuchus. Well, so how can we argue that maybe Dionysus might be associated with Ophiuchus? Well, first of all, we got the Thyrsus. We'll get to that in a second. But he's famously born, the third time. How is he born? Not out of the head of Zeus.
The thigh.
The thigh.
Yeah.
And so look where Ophiuchus is located. So the myths, when you read the myths as a child, you get kind of the child's version. And then you grow up and you're like, I love the myths. And then you start reading and you're like, this is bizarre. Yeah. This is violent. This is sexual. This is crazy. This is, what is going on? What's going on is they're based on the stars and they're esoteric. And anyway, he's born out of the thigh of Zeus because Ophiuchus is right below Hercules and born right out of the thigh there. And then we got the Thyrsus. I put an arrow to point to that pine cone shape. And it's the distinctive pine cone shape that we also see in the figures of the Apkallu, of ancient
the sages.
Sumer and Babylon. This is from a relief in the ancient city of Nineveh, famous. You see lots of these figures. Sometimes they have a human head with a big square beard. Sometimes they have a eagle's head or different figures. Sometimes even a bull kind of a thing. But this is holding up a pine cone in one hand. So let me circle that for us, for those who are able to watch at home. Distinctive pine cone. I could pull up picture after picture from ancient Mesopotamia with figures who are holding a pine cone, and they're doing it in a way that I argue corresponds directly to Ophiuchus. And what's he holding in his other hand, this Apkallu?
He's holding the basket or the jug.
The bucket or the bag or a
vessel.
The famous bucket or bag or man purse, sometimes people call it, or what's in the purse or what's in the bag.
Yeah, what's in the bag?
This is kind of become a meme almost.
Yeah.
Well, I would argue this is clearly an Ophiuchus figure because there's the pine cone that corresponds to the serpent head on the side of Ophiuchus. There's also the wings. So look on the left side of the Apkallu. You see the 2 wings?
Yep.
So the serpent tail could look like a eagle wing, kind of. See how that looks?
Mm-hmm.
But also, next to Ophiuchus, the horizon is a little bit in the way on this. I could make this more clear, but you've got the stars of the outline of the constellation Libra, the scales or the balances right below the serpent head side. So one hand in this opkalu is holding a pine cone at about head level. Look at Ophiuchus. Yep. One hand is holding down below a bag with a handle, or a satchel with a handle. Or some people say it's a bucket. It's not really a bag, it's a bucket. Maybe there's wine in the bucket. I don't know. But you can see the connection there. Let me show you one more just to cement that this is a characteristic of Ophiuchus, this pine cone, or this bag. In this case, I've got the Archangel Michael. This is obviously much later painting from the 1400s. But Michael, so Ophiuchus figures often have a spear. Michael is slaying, this is from Revelation 12. Michael is slaying the dragon with 10 heads, or 7 heads and 10 horns, who later identified later in the text of Revelation 12 as Satan, always depicted as standing on the dragon in these artwork, and often spearing with a spear. Ophiuchus figures will often have a spear. Like I said, Athena, she's an Ophiuchus figure too. But in Dionysus' case, it's not a spear, it's a thyrsus. But what's he got in his other hand?
The scales.
Scales or balances.
Yeah.
And here's a spear for Michael. You can see it's almost the exact same angle that the artist from the 1400s has depicted. You know, it goes right down to
Scorpio.
What's Ophiuchus standing on? Scorpio, the constellation that looks like a serpent with multiple heads, just like that old serpent in Revelation 12 that Michael is always depicted as standing on in the artwork. This is the text of Revelation 12 doesn't have artwork. Some people might say, well, you can't prove that the myths are based on the stars because of artwork. You're right. But the stories themselves have enough textual detail to show that they're he throws down Michael. Sometimes the angel is standing 1 foot in the water, 1 foot on the land. That's a characteristic of Ophiuchus because 1 foot is in the Milky Way, 1 foot is not. You can see it in the picture. Anyway, the texts themselves will tell you. The pictures are just so great for a podcast or for a video, so I put them in there. But this proves or strongly supports my argument that Ophiuchus figures will often be carrying that satchel or balances, and also that we saw that a pine cone, that Dionysus in this case is carrying the staff tipped with a pine cone. Yeah. It's kind of a transitive property. I'm saying, look, if the Apkallu pine cone is Ophiuchus, then the pine cone of the thyrsus reed is also Ophiuchus. And by the way, he's located under his father, Zeus, comes out of the thigh. There's still more. I can show you more and more and
this
more.
This is another connection. The temperance card. Temperance in the tarot is the angel with wings standing with 1 foot in the water, and then there's a crab or a crawdad coming up out of the water with the claws, which could be Scorpio under his feet. And then he's got 2 goblets or jugs. Yeah. He's pouring the water from one to the other. You're a
little away from the mic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Say that again.
He's pouring water or some liquid from one cup to another cup.
Yeah. So
that are in the place of the balances. Yeah. The scales. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he's either it's kind of like the serpent that he's holding is actually water in this case. He's pouring it from one cup to another cup.
Great connections. So the tarot or tarot depictions are definitely incorporating lots of celestial. I don't get into them that much. First of all, I'm not an expert in it, but also because I try and go to the ancient myths. And what happened was all this ancient system had to go underground when literalist Christianity came, and started suppressing all the ancient wisdom. It went underground. So Western esotericism preserves a lot of this in underground kind of occulted fashion, which is very important evidence, very important field of study. It's not the field that I study because I don't know when those tarot cards or conventions came about. I suspect it was later, after.
Well, they're pretty. The symbolism is claimed to come from ancient Egypt.
Well, it's clearly very ancient symbolism. Clearly. So, yeah, that's a great connection. Let me drive on though.
Yeah.
Well, wait. This is also a good place.
Okay.
If you switch back to I know you got a bunch of lines drawn on there, but go back to the Apkallu, and then we'll look at Baalbek real quick before we move on. That's perfect.
What's the name of the constellation that's next to the corona? The guy with the pipe.
Oh yeah,
Boötes. Yeah, that's Boötes. Yeah, he's off to the right of that red arrow.
Yeah,
what is red arrow for those watching?
What does he do? What is his?
Oh, he's in a lot of myths. Sometimes he'll be driving a chariot.
Okay,
Ophiuchus will be a chariot, and he'll be driving a chariot.
Okay,
and he's smoking a long pipe. So sometimes he'll be playing a pipe type instrument. Sometimes there's all kinds of things that he does. I used to think Krishna. So Krishna plays a flute. I used to think Krishna was associated with Boötes. Later, I wrote a second edition. That's the Ancient Worldwide System is the second edition of Sarmis Volume 1 because I kind of updated and corrected a few things that I'm now convinced that Krishna and his flute are also Ophiuchus. The left side of Ophiuchus, the tail, is the flute. He's holding out to the side. Let me clear it out and show you the Apkallu, and then then you take over the screen and show us.
Just real quick.
Yeah, let me get back to here. Apkallu, I have to draw in these guys.
Yeah.
Here comes Ophiuchus. And the Apkallu should be next.
We got some arrows. Yep.
Thyrsus, pine cone. I think that's the pine cone.
Pine cone.
There's the evidence. Evidence is Apkallu, pine cone.
Pine cone, bucket.
Bucket. Yeah. So look at the location of the bucket. Russ has a mind-blowing connection that he has discovered. Let me unshare my screen.
Yeah.
Stop share.
Okay. So yeah, I've noticed this about Baalbek, and people have seen this before. The shape of it. So we're on Google Earth here, just looking down at Baalbek. It's the orientation is turned to make this clear, but this is the side of Baalbek, and you can see it's a person. There's a head. And
so his head is towards the east.
Yeah, head is facing east. Basically, here's the body with the arms and the legs.
Very rectangular person too.
Yes, this is a huge. This is an enormous site.
Yeah.
But the foundation of the site is basically makes this outline of this person. This is this octagonal or whatever. This is the head, and it's interesting because you're talking about the thigh. Bacchus is born from the thigh of Zeus. Well, this is the temple of Jupiter on the legs.
That is, yep. There's those giant pillars.
Yeah,
with the
these are the only pillars that are left of the temple of Jupiter, and it's in the legs of the figure. And then over here, which is basically the hand holding this box, this is the temple of Bacchus.
In the box, you said, before I even showed any of that stuff that I just showed, you asked me at one of the breaks, you looked at this and you said, this always reminded me of that bag.
Yes, this is the bag.
And there it is.
I wonder if this is a clue about the contents of the bag in some mythical way.
And then the temple itself in the bag is...
Yeah, it's this
the temple to Bacchus.
The temple to Bacchus or Dionysus, which is the god of wine, right? The god of spirit, the god of the thrice-born. And then, of course, the fact that he was born from the thigh of Zeus, and over here, the temple of Zeus is the legs of the figure.
Dear listeners, this is why you tune in to the Serpent.
So he's
Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
So he's holding the pine cone up high at head level, which is the pineal gland.
Oh yeah.
And then in the box, he's carrying the spirit.
There you go. Wow. Yeah. So just to make sure people see, this is the Temple of Jupiter. This is Google Maps now with the labels. Temple of Jupiter is down here in the legs. Temple of Bacchus, right here is the box being held by the hand. That's with the labels on it.
Very cool. And I'll show you. So just keep that picture in mind of this square figure, because if I can rush ahead and get it done in the time that we need, I've got some other connections that are super maybe relevant to that. I mean, this is all new cool stuff. I didn't think of the Baalbek site at all.
Once you brought up you were going to talk about the god of wine, I was like, man, maybe we can get to that, because I've always wanted to show someone.
Crazy.
Yeah, you said I've got this thing.
I've always wanted to show
somebody who would take me seriously.
I'm just humoring you here. No, that's a great connection. All right, let me share my screen again.
All right.
Because I'm going to drive on to some more star connections that you might enjoy.
Yeah, because we like your take on it, that these are all telling us things about self and all this, but we also want it to be like real stuff, man.
Yeah.
Self is real stuff, Kyle.
No, I mean, okay, you got me there. Touche.
This is the most important
I mean,
stuff.
gigantic buildings.
That's right. Huge
There was
pyramids.
this movie
and culture.
There was this movie back in the 80s called The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. And I don't even think I ever really saw it. But somewhere in there.
Whoa. That's a tangent we can't go on in this cube.
Yeah.
No, they go, no matter where in the world you are, no matter where in the world you go, or no matter where in the universe you go, remember, no matter where in the universe you go, there you are.
Yeah.
So you can go to all these cool sites, but it's all about connecting with yourself.
Okay.
Cool.
No matter, even if you go to Baalbek, you brought you with you.
That's
so
right.
you've got to deal with
That's
these
right.
things. All right. So
The
here's
reason
a
I know
now.
I'm me is because I never go anywhere. It's everything else that goes away sometimes, right? Yeah, it's very solipsistic. I got it.
Anyway, sorry about that tangent, but it'll come back
it's all
somehow
good.
in
Yeah.
the cube. Here's a Maenad that follows Dionysus around. They are wild and crazy dancers, but she's carrying a thyrsus.
Yep.
Very beautiful artwork there with the dresses.
Yeah, is that high relief?
This is a new
It's a high
item
relief.
that you
Gorgeous.
can add to your Halloween costume set.
There you go, the
folks.
thyrsus.
The thyrsus. So along with
so
your
there's a-
shoulder rivers and
Bowling
Yeah.
pin hats.
bowling pin hats and butt flaps, you can have a thyrsus.
All right. So she's a Maenad, and the Maenads they would go into this frenzy and they would tear, things apart. Sometimes animals, like as a sacrifice. Sometimes people. Orpheus was torn apart by Maenads, I believe. But not to get off on a tangent here. Orpheus is also associated with specific constellations. But the Maenads were into ecstatic. They're going into ecstasy. So ecstasy is about connecting with something that's even beyond you. Ecstatic, mystical, going to, and I talk about this in some of my books, especially my most recent one, which is called Myth and Trauma. The connection to higher self is like the gateway to the connection to the higher realm, the universal realm, where we get those serendipities or those synchronicities or those messages where someone in a total another state, you're thinking about that person and then they call you, or vice versa. And it just can't be explained. Well, how is that just coincidence, or is there some kind of space-time fabric or invisible realm that we're somehow connected to? Well, I believe we're connected to that through higher self. And the Maenads who are connected to Dionysus or who are around Dionysus are, in a way, a picture of that. They're going into ecstasy. Sometimes the ecstasy gets out of control and they rip people apart. But
So
anyway, I want to show this
real quick.
Go ahead.
From the online etymology dictionary, ecstatic. In the 1590s, from Greek ekstatikos, mystically absorbed, unstable, inclined to depart from, or characterized or subject to intense emotions.
Yeah, and the root of the word itself, they probably say it in there somewhere, but ex means out of or from, away from. Stasis means, static or, physical.
being
So it's like, it's getting beyond the limits. It's getting beyond the boundaries. It's connecting to that higher. So this is Dionysus is an ecstatic god. He's surrounded by ecstatic figures, the Maenads, and it's about going across those boundaries, and he's associated with wine. But, this whole concept, I am convinced that he's connected to Ophiuchus, and Ophiuchus figures are often connected to or depicting for us higher self. Let me show. Let's see.
Yeah,
here.
sta to stand, make, or be firm, and ex meaning out.
So you're out of your physical, out of psychic travel or shamanic flights of ecstasy.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a book by Mircea Eliade, Eliade, from the 50s. Fantastic book called Shamanism, and it's called Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy is the subtitle.
Oh.
So who do I think are the Maenads who are following or surrounding Dionysus? There's Hercules. There's Ophiuchus, we've already seen. Here's another one I want to outline for you. That is
Sagittarius?
No.
Sagittarius.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful Sagittarius. A figure that all these constellations play male figures and female figures. So Sagittarius, you can see why it would often play a female figure. Long dress, kind of shape, but carrying a bow. So I can show in other places, and I have shown many times on different podcasts, that the goddess Artemis with her bow is associated with Sagittarius. I argue also that her twin brother Apollo is associated with Sagittarius. After all, they're twins. So can be a boy or a girl, and that's probably when you have a figure like Achilles being dressed as a girl growing up by his mother so that he wouldn't have to go off to the Trojan War, different story, or Dionysus being dressed as a girl, probably associated with Sagittarius. But the Maenads, I'm sure, are associated with Sagittarius. Often many beautiful goddesses are associated with Sagittarius. You can see Sagittarius is right next to the Milky Way, which is fiery, the fiery perishing of Semele, the mother. She might be Sagittarius. Zeus is associated with Hercules. He will often see a beautiful maiden down there. From his position up in the heavens, he'll see a Sagittarius figure and then come down to her in the form of a swan. There's a swan right next to Hercules. I'm not going to draw it. Or David. David in the story of, in the Bible, David is associated with the figure of Hercules. I could show that a million times, but David is up on a roof when he spies the beautiful Bathsheba
down at the bath. Yeah.
You see how Hercules could be standing on a roof? Any roofs underneath his foot there?
Ophiuchus is the roof there.
Yeah.
He also could be the giant.
Yeah.
He's definitely the giant. Yeah, he's definitely Goliath. In fact, there's no doubt that Ophiuchus figures play a lot of giants. And a lot of times giants are wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goliath, but also in the Norse myths, a lot of times Thor, associated with Hercules, will be fighting a Jotun associated with Ophiuchus. But anyway, you see how Sagittarius is kind of running around Ophiuchus there. She's by a pool. She's by the wide part of the Milky Way. That's why David sees Bathsheba bathing there by the pool. A lot of times there's a goddess, bathing in the pool in different myths. Anyway, let me show a few Maenads who are in the outline of Sagittarius. This one on the right, not super Sagittarius posture, but clearly dancing or doing some kind of a dance. Sagittarius. Here's a different Maenad. This is an ancient relief of a Maenad. And look at her posture. I've got a more modern adaptation of that very same. This is like in, I think, the Royal Palace in Spain, but it's clearly based on the same artwork that I just showed. It's based on ancient artwork. See how she's got the same. See this distinctive part of Sagittarius, this plume at the top of the head. See her hand?
Yep.
There. And she's also holding in the artwork, she's holding a drum or a timpani or something like that. So Sagittarius is usually depicted as or envisioned as holding a bow.
Yeah, so in this case, she's banging the drum instead of shooting a bow.
Here's a mosaic of this is actually another kind of Maenad scene. She's holding a tambourine above her head there. But you see how she's walking in one direction and looking back over her shoulder in another direction? Mm-hmm. That's a very distinctive aspect of the constellation Sagittarius. Look at the constellation. See how it could be envisioned as walking one way, kind of to the left, but looking back and shooting back towards the right?
Yep.
So you have all kinds of myths where, like, Lot's wife turns back to look at the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Or Orpheus down in the underworld is not supposed to look back when his wife Eurydice is coming. So this feature of Sagittarius of walking one way but looking back is a distinctive feature that's found around the myths. You don't need pictures to know that it's Sagittarius. If it's a figure who's walking one way and looking back, it's probably a Sagittarius figure. But you see how that matches up there. So let me show you.
I don't want to go on another tangent, but is the pillar of salt the Milky Way?
So she gets turned into a pillar of salt. Yes, I think that is right.
It's like in one way you could look at Ophiuchus rather than holding a serpent. He's climbing up the cliff. He's like just about to reach the top of the cliff, and
so she's looking back at the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. That's definitely the Milky Way. The fire and brimstone raining down. Right.
That's cool.
Now, what is the pillar of salt that she turns into? It could be the Milky Way. It could be actually an Ophiuchus. Looks kind of like a pillar, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Ophiuchus itself looks kind of like a pillar. And we're going to see that. That's why I brought up this sarcophagus here. This is a sarcophagus. It's probably not for sale. You can't use it for yourself. But look at the sarcophagi they used to have in the Roman times. This is, I think, a Roman era. It's in Amsterdam. So if you're ever in Amsterdam, go find the museum and check this out. These are maenads. And
see, they're slaughtering. They've killed something there.
Yeah, they killed something. Let me. I've got my slides. I've got a little tiny bit out of order, but hopefully it's not distracting. Let's check out these maenads. Let's see the one that's looking in one direction, walking in the other direction. So just pretend Ophiuchus isn't there.
There's the one on the right who's holding something up and looking back. She's got one leg back.
She's holding something up, looking back. So here she is. There's Sagittarius. Pretend Ophiuchus hasn't been outlined yet. That's not supposed to come until the end. I messed up. But anyway, Sagittarius. There's Sagittarius. See how she's holding something up in the same place where the bow is.
Yep.
Walking one way, looking the other way. She even has like leaves on top of her head to maybe
make the
she doesn't have her hand over her head this time.
Yeah.
Okay. Who's next? Well, someone holding a pitcher, pouring out a pitcher. There's even a goat underneath the pitcher. If you look there, there's a goat right there under the pitcher. So who could that be? Who could have a pitcher in the heavens pouring out something? That is Aquarius. Look at where Aquarius is relative to Sagittarius. Yeah. Look at where she is relative to Sagittarius. That Maenad is clearly Sagittarius. In fact, she's holding a rod in one hand as well. So she's got a rod and a pitcher. Now, Aquarius, look at Aquarius. You see how there's a very distinctive running posture? Mm-hmm. And a front leg that's like a rod. So sometimes that front leg is like envisioned as a spear going into the side of an unfortunate warrior. But so sometimes an Aquarius figure will have a rod and a pitcher. So actually Aquarius figures and Ophiuchus figures are almost like they kind of meld back and forth. There's a curious connection between Aquarius and Ophiuchus because they both have like rods and kind of the same associations a lot of times. Like Jesus is an Ophiuchus figure, but he's also an Aquarius figure. He separates the sheep from the goats. You can see on the left side, if you know your constellations, Aries, the ram, is over on the left, and I'm about to show you the goat of Capricorn right there.
Yeah, there's Capricorn, which on the sarcophagus is right below the picture.
Yeah, there's a goat, and then there's also this thing getting torn apart on the altar there. Yeah, that could be a goat head as well. Right. So clearly this ancient artist who carved this sarcophagus, and by the way, there's tons of...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's interesting. If he's tearing the goat apart, that's kind of symbolic of the changing of an age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Very, very true. But there's there's a ton of tangents we could go on for sure. I don't know if there's ever... I haven't found a lot of evidence for an Age of Capricorn ending, but
no, that wouldn't work because it would be going the other direction.
Well, in very ancient time, but anyway, you can clearly see a goat underneath her picture, and then whatever that is on the altar, I think it might be a goat head. It could be a bull head. It could be, I don't know what it is, but clearly it's in the right orientation. Look, we got a Sagittarius, we got an Aquarius. There's a Capricorn. What I was going to say is these sarcophagi. There's a lot of Dionysus sarcophagi that have maenads and a Dionysus figure, which we'll get to in a minute. But let's continue going. There's even a little more imagery here. This is the constellation that comes after Aquarius in the sun's progression through the year. It goes from Sagittarius to Capricorn to Aquarius to
Pisces.
The two fishes who are kind of tied together by what's called the fish cord or the fish ribbon, or it's called the whatever it's called. I'm going to continue rolling along in the sake of time. There's a Maenad to the left of the Aquarius Maenad who's holding I don't know what she's holding, but it's like connected by a string.
Connected by a cord. Yeah, I see that.
I kind of outline it to help people see. So it's like, there's no doubt, this is not an accident. This is not, this ancient artist, whoever carved this sarcophagus, knew the orientation of the constellations and had this Maenad, this clearly a Sagittarius Maenad. This is just kind of like supporting evidence. But wait, who's next to Sagittarius? Well, that's when I'm supposed to outline Ophiuchus, which has been outlined all this time. There's Ophiuchus.
All right.
Now, where's Ophiuchus? Right there. So what's that? It's like,
he's this like
almost a pillar with a torso coming out of it.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
So that's actually, there's an ancient style of statuary, which is known as a herm for Hermes. Because a lot of ancient Hermes statues, it would just be a pillar, like a rectangular pillar with a Hermes head on top and a phallus. Okay, so they're actually quite graphically sexual. I'll show you a picture of one. This is a herm. And there's how you spell it, herm, just like Hermes. A lot of times they're Hermes, but in this case, we've got basically where Ophiuchus is, next to Sagittarius, where Dionysus should be, we've got a herm. So that goes back to your rectangle at ball back there, Russ. I mean, the rectangular figure, very rectangular, because it's associated with, I would argue, the herm is associated with Ophiuchus. Look at how Ophiuchus looks like a pillar, that tall rectangle.
A tower.
With a triangle on top. Could any parts of, like, sticking out of it to the left be phallic?
Oh, yeah. I do see that. Yep.
Same thing with Aquarius, by the way. That, the forward leg of Aquarius is, in many myths, interpreted as an exaggerated male member.
Okay.
Like when Noah passes out drunk and is naked. He drinks wine. Actually, Noah is the first winemaker. You guys probably know that. And he plants a vineyard, then he gets drunk and he passes out drunk. Anyway, I can show that.
Drinking rosé.
Stars too. So let me just wrap up here because I know we're pushing on time, but what's this? It's a sadhu. Sadhu, S-A-D-H-U, or sometimes two Ds, sometimes spelled with two Ds. It's an ascetic of India. It's a very ancient tradition. What's he carrying?
A trident.
Yeah, it's got a trident.
A trident
and a pail or a bucket or
a bucket.
Yeah.
So many ascetics around the world, even in ancient times, they would carry a bucket and a staff, or like a food jar and a staff, or a water jar and a staff. And I would argue that's probably related to these divine traditions that are related to the stars.
And his beads are the asteroid belt.
There you go. The firmament.
Well, the heavy beads and the long robes are very similar to Dionysus, right?
Yeah.
And Dionysus is associated with India. And here's another picture of a sadhu. This is from 1928. What's he sitting on?
Leopard.
The leopard pelt.
Leopard pelt. Yeah. So they let their hair grow. This is where dreadlocks, the interchange of these cultures is the Rasta tradition is it's a mystical tradition. It's connecting into the same profound ancient wisdom that we're talking about here. But let me show Ophiuchus up close. Any aspects of Ophiuchus could maybe explain that trident? Let's see. Look at the thyrsus side. Look at the head side. How many stars are at the top of the...
There's 3 stars up there at the head of the serpent, or the top of the wine glass.
Yeah, I see it.
2, 3. That's how many.
So if you just connect them a different way, you've got a trident. Yeah.
Let's do it.
There you go.
Boom.
That's it.
A small trident.
Yeah.
And there is a sadhu who lets his hair grow, who wears long robes, brightly colored robes, by the way, the saffron robes of Ophiuchus, of Dionysus. And remember, Dionysus is associated with India as well. In some of the legends, he came from India. Sometimes he's pulled by a lion. We could get into all these other, it's all celestial, or these myths have they are pointing us to profound truths using this celestial code that connect, and Ophiuchus figures, for a variety of reasons, have to do with reconnecting with higher self.
Yeah, so I had this thought too, that
if
you think of a theater, And the theater has a number of props, right? It doesn't have infinite props. There's a number of props. And so those props throughout the life of the theater are used to illustrate or symbolize so many different things.
That's right.
So you can show with the same props and the same cast of characters so many different stories. And so in a way, it's like projecting that theater onto the sky, and you have, here's all your props, and like, let's tell the story of the, you're using the same props to tell all the different stories.
And the same actors.
Yeah.
So you don't have
the
infinite
same
actors, right? Even today, we don't have infinite actors.
No,
it's like, wait a minute, I know, there's Brad Pitt again. Or, wait a minute, I didn't recognize that actor at first, but that's, I've seen her in that other thing. But now she has an accent and she's pretending to be British. But it's the same. This is what the myths are doing. And it's really a great connection you just made, Kyle, because acting and theater in ancient times and still today.
That was the entertainment. I mean, that was it.
Well, and it's connected to the gods, is what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
So the theater was about the gods. And when the actor puts on the makeup or the mask, they become the god. They take on the role and they have to stay. And they're like, when they are across the boundary line, it's like the sacred boundary line. They are in that role. And that's still today in like Cantonese opera. When they put on them, first they have to put the makeup on themselves, or there's very strict rules about how they do it. And then when they're in character, if they're portraying this god or that goddess, they can't do certain things because they're that god or that goddess right now. So they can't talk until they're on stage or what, different things like that, because it's a sacred. And actually in Taiwan, they still have theater that's for the gods. It's the actors and actresses or the gods and goddesses that the actors are portraying, is what I should say, are actually doing it for the benefit of the gods. So the people in the audience can talk, make noise, eat food, because they're not the real audience. The real audience is divine realm. So it's like, it's a great analogy because acting and stage and theater is connected with like this whole thing. I was going to show that Moses has horns and is clearly associated with, I was showing the Michelangelo of Moses.
Yeah, the horn.
Has horns. Dionysus in some, aspects has horns. Dionysus and Moses have very clear parallels as well. But, we probably run out of time.
We're running up on time, but I
do you want any Tower of Babel?
What's that?
Or do you want a quick Tower of Babel or not?
We'll have to just get you back on, man.
I think we ought to do another show and do deep dive into the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
I only have a brief Tower of Babel, but okay. I mean, it's a brief passage in the Bible. It is mentioned in other texts as well. But anyway,
well,
hopefully we've established that these stories are based on the stars or connected to the stars.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a fantastic presentation. And yeah, we'll have to get you back on soon. And because I've got all these questions that we didn't get to from the Snake Force. And we can talk Tower of Babel and you can answer questions. So we'll just
that would be great.
Yeah.
Glad to do it. Well, thanks so much for having me on, Russ and Kyle. Your questions and insights are always awesome, always crackling.
Well, thank you so much.
Well,
yeah, thanks.
Going around the world, look, is an Ophiuchus figure going around the world related to snakes in any way? Like, look, Dionysus goes around the world. He's a civilizing figure. He brings wine. Osiris goes around the world. Osiris. Everyone thinks Osiris is associated with Orion. I can show these also associated with Ophiuchus. Is Ophiuchus associated with serpents?
Yes.
Like what's on either side?
Right.
So the civilizing figure that goes around the world is associated with
serpents.
Brothers of the Serpent.
That's right. The feathered serpent.
Anyway.
Yeah. Cheers, man.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Listeners everywhere.
Thank you.
All listeners everywhere. Yeah. Embrace your higher self, or at least go looking for it. And you have many sides, and there's nothing wrong with it.
That's right. The tools are in the myths, folks, and in the stars. Thanks, Dave.
Be yourself.
All right, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. We certainly did. It's always great to have Dave on. And he's got so much knowledge on the myths and the stories, and we need to get him on more often just to talk about the stories and tell them, because I think that's really important, just to hear a good storyteller tell those myths.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
we'll be getting him back on, and sorry to the Snake Force people. I asked you guys for questions to ask Dave, and I didn't get to ask any of them. So we will be having him back on. We'll get some more myth stories, and I'll get some of your questions in.
Yep, he had a bit on the Tower of Babel, which we had talked about previous, and
didn't get.
We
to
shut him down.
Yeah, just totally shut him down.
I really didn't want to do that, but we're gonna force him to do 2 hours on Tower of Babel.
That's right. Yeah, whole show on the Tower of Babel. So, all right, but you guys can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Check out the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. All the podcast related stuff is there, including the encyclopedia and the glossary, the SnakeSkins, which includes t-shirts and everything you can get from TeePublic, and hats. If you want an embroidered hat, there's links to get that there as well. And if you want, other clothing items with the embroidery, you can contact that business. It's a local business to us. You can contact them. Their contact information is there to get a shirt embroidered or whatever you want. So do that for the SnakeSkins. Join the pyramid scheme. Support the show however you can. Value for value. Give us your talent, your time, your treasure through Patreon or PayPal. Thanks to all the people who have done that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Join the Facebook group if you want, or join the Discord. There's a link to that on the website as well. That's run by Jeff, who also runs the Library of the Serpent. There's a link to that on the website also. Thanks so much to History Shift, who makes all of our YouTube videos. If you're watching this on YouTube, he put it together. Thanks to him very much. And we love you, listeners.
Be
Thank you
good
guys
to
so
yourself.
much. Yeah.
And be excellent to each other.
That's right.
Love you, always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work and watch those stars.